Welcome to the Strong Enough Podcast, your relationship wellness podcast. I'm your host, Claudia. Today's guest is going to share with us how she experienced the cycle of abuse, first from her mother and then from a romantic partner. She was able to break that cycle, though, and do the hard work on herself to get better. She now helps other people as a life coach. Please help me in welcoming Brittany Josie. Brittany, hi. It is so great to have you here today. I really appreciate you joining me. How are you today?
I'm so good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I know that when it comes to relationships and family, we have a lot to unpack today, but why don't we start with you letting our viewers know a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am originally from the West Coast, born and raised, and moved to Colorado about 11 years ago and love Summit County. Never left, obviously. I think that happens to a lot of people that move to Summit County, and worked a lot of different jobs until I landed on life coaching and writing. And that's what I'm doing now. But it was a journey to get there. So back in Portland, growing up in a large family, there were a lot of challenges around that. And my parents were arguably overwhelmed. And it just from there spiraled into me moving out as a teenager just to get away from the drama and, continuing to struggle with relationships has been a lot of work that I put in, trying to get past those challenges. And I think with relationships and parenting, that's the first relationship you have and it's sacred. So talking about relationships and unpacking things, that's what I've been doing since I moved to Colorado. And that's what I've been doing for, the better part of a decade, is learning more about myself and learning about the brain and learning about emotions. And last year during COVID, in fact, when the shutdown happened, I could feel myself slipping into some depression. So I looked into a life coach for myself and did a lot of work there, and eventually wrote a book during the pandemic of all of my poetry. So that was exciting. And that's how we met, in fact, is because of the poetry and because of some classes that I've been teaching in the community. And I'm so happy to have met you that way and to be here with you.
Thank you so much for saying that. I was so impressed when we first talked just about your openness and your willingness to tell your story. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to hit pretty much everything that you just discussed. So I want to back up to growing up. So I know you grew up in a very large family. There were 8 or 9 kids, I think.
9 total. Yep, I'm right in the middle. Right in the sweet spot.
So, being the middle child is rough enough, I think, when you have 3 kids. So 9 has got to be difficult. And, it sounds like your mom was kind of the biggest struggle for you as far as having a relationship with your mom and feeling safe, both emotionally and physically, with your mom. So will you talk a little bit about that and how that evolved while you were growing up?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. My mother is magic. She is one of the most creative, empathetic, loving people that I know. And having 9 children is a challenge most of us can't relate to. So I don't know how fair it is of me to judge her parenting necessarily, but it wasn't the parenting I needed. The parenting I needed was gentleness, understanding. I think anyone wants that, but it wasn't something she was capable of delivering. She had moments. She definitely had moments. But then swinging to the other spectrum of those emotions was anger, overwhelm, frustration, maybe even fear. And I think that we were the target of those emotions. And that has definitely affected my relationships with everybody, because again, that's your first relationship, is the relationship you have with your parents, but especially women. So for me to be able to write about women, for women, which is what my book of poetry really is, was really powerful. But then also working with the community and offering these poetry classes to people that maybe are in a similar situation, because according to DoSomething.org, 1 in 7 children in the last year has been reported as being neglected and or abused. And it only makes sense that the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence has statistics saying that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men is abused at the hand of their partner. So if this is something that we're raised to believe is normal, then of course it only makes sense that our human brain is going to think that that's normal going into adulthood. So I was in a situation with my first boyfriend who became physical, and breaking out of that relationship and coming to terms with where that idea and that perspective really came from is powerful for me, because information is power. Joan Didion is a favorite of mine. She's a prophetic writer and public speaker and has written many, many books. But she even touches on that as well. So information is power, and being able to inform myself and not judge myself was a process for me to get there.
I do think that is one of the hardest things that I see and that I have personally experienced when it comes to abuse, whether it's domestic abuse or familial abuse, is, letting yourself know that you didn't do anything wrong and that you deserve happiness and that you deserve something better. One thing I picked up on that you said when you talked about your mom is that the pendulum swing. And what that reminded me of was the cycle of abuse when it comes to domestic violence. We have the honeymoon phase where everything's great, and then it goes into tension, and then the abuse phase. And it sounds like that's what you went through with your mom. Would you agree with that? And would you say that had a big impact on then entering a relationship that became abusive later on?
Absolutely. And I think just being able to view yourself from a perspective of compassion is easier said than done, but it's so vital in the healing process, and being able to understand that these people's actions towards me is not a reflection of who I am or anything that I've done wrong. It's just my comfort zone. And that phrase of comfort zone typically has a positive connotation to it, but it can be very true for negative situations as well. So, for example, I was raised in a household where violence and yelling and name calling was normal, totally normal. And it was balanced by the extreme of the high highs of spending time with my brothers and sisters outside, or baking with my mom when she was having a good day. There are good memories, but there are also really bad memories. And so moving forward into adulthood, especially moving out so young, I assumed it was normal. And then what you said is we're predispositioned to not think that feeling good is what we deserve. Well, I thought that it was normal to feel these big shifts in emotion and to sort of be all over the place. I thought that was normal, but it's not sustainable. It's quite exhausting, and it's not fun for anybody. And so as I started to lose relationships that were important to me, I realized what I was doing. I did some of the deep, deep digging, but it wasn't after plenty of numbing. I did plenty of numbing and spent a lot of time trying to escape those feelings and trying to self-medicate those feelings. So I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm some sort of amazing success story. It was a journey, for sure.
I would say you are an amazing success story, even though it is a journey, because you are giving other people the understanding and the hope that they can do it too. I know there are a lot of people right now and people who watch this who are in that place that you were of the numbing and the self-medicating because they don't think they can get past it. So you are a success story. So do not forget that.
Thank you. Good reminder.
Yeah, you are absolutely welcome. So what gave you the courage and the strength to leave at the young age that you did? Because as we discussed, what you were experiencing was normal to you. It was what you'd grown up with the huge pendulum swings and the great days and then the terrible days and the scary days. So what was the moment when you said, you know what, I can't do this anymore and I've got to get away?
Mm-hmm. Good question. I wish that there were some sort of big aha moment, but I think the human nature is such that it's sort of gradual, where you get used to it and then you recoil, and you get used to it and you recoil and you heal, and it's just this cycle over and over again. And eventually you have to recognize the cycle or get sucked into it. And if that sounds harsh, it's because it is, because I could feel myself getting sucked into the circle and I didn't want to stay there. So I guess there was, thinking it through, there was one specific moment where, my parents' relationship had been rocky for some time. I was away attending, I'm a musical person, I'm an artistic person, obviously I'm a writer, but I was attending a music competition in the hopes of getting a scholarship for college. And I came home from this weekend and my dad was gone. And I was pretty close with my dad. For all his faults, we are very similar. And my mom refused to tell me. I said, "Where did he go?" And she said, "I don't know and I don't care." And if I were to think of a defining moment, I think that would be one. Because, again, parents are not perfect, and I want to show her all the mercy in the world. However, that's a little, to be withholding with your child about where their parent is. I think that was probably a defining moment for me, where it was very clear. I was 16 at the time, and it became very clear to me that things were not going to change unless I changed. And it's tough, it's tough to come to terms with that and accept that your parent is not ever going to be the parent that you want, but more so, they're not going to be the person that you thought that they were, if that makes sense. They are human. Absolutely. They are human. But it was a realization of, I now need to take ownership of my life, and it's up to me now. And that also may have been a defining moment of putting up those walls and starting the process of self-medicating and keeping everyone at arm's length. And just thinking about that time in my life and how guarded I was, I think says a lot about the relationship I had with my mom specifically. Just very guarded and hesitant, touch and go, because you never really knew what mood she was going to be in. And when she was happy, gosh, you were so glad, because she was so delightful to be around, so vibrant. And I see a lot of my mom in me. I relate to her a lot. And even the less savory characteristics of my mom. For example, if I am upset, I will shut down. It's really difficult for me to communicate if I'm not feeling something that's joyful or peaceful or happy. I just would rather internalize it. And that's what she did a lot of the time. And then had these explosive moments. So it makes sense to me now. But back then, that was the moment where I said, no, this is not okay anymore, and saved up $1,000 and moved out. And she didn't even know where my new place was. It was just sort of like, okay, bye.
That had to be really rough, especially at 16, to make that decision and follow through with the decision. So it seems like you were in a place where you said, okay, enough is enough. I'm not going to deal with this anymore. And you got away from your mom. But then sometime later, you found yourself in a relationship that became very similar, a romantic relationship that became very similar. Mm-hmm. So will you talk about when you realized that you were back in that pattern again with another person?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So in that relationship, I grew up in a home where cleanliness wasn't prioritized. Laundry was always out of control. There's mold in the bathroom. Just not a healthy. It was a reflection of the mental state of the household. And when I moved out on my own, I learned how to clean with the help of my patient roommates. And then I met this person who I ended up dating for roughly 2.5 years. And he came from a family with literally white picket fences. Not wealthy by any means, but a healthy, functioning family, middle class, nice neighborhood. And it just felt like a dream that somebody of this level could want somebody like me. And that was coming out of an abusive home and going into a relationship that was blissful for a while. And when the cracks started to form, I started gaining weight really quickly. And I had spent my life heavy, sort of going back and forth between, overweight and obese. And I remember stepping on a scale and it topped out at 200 plus pounds. And I said, I am not healthy. This is not healthy. I need to change. So as I started to change, she started to get angry and didn't like the changes. And of course, looking back with hindsight, communication is key into any healthy relationship. And ultimately, we did end up splitting up. And this was after we had lived together. But when we split up, I took him back probably at least 3 times, maybe 4. And just this back and forth of me saying, well, nobody else is ever going to love me, especially not somebody this good. I'm used to it already. Why don't I just make do? And talked about even getting married and having kids. And so glad I averted that crisis, right? And came to realize that the gaslighting had not stopped. It had just changed hands, and that I was allowing this to happen. And, there were a lot of tears. There was a lot of frustration. There were a lot of walks in the middle of the night where I was just really hemming and hawing over the fact that I couldn't believe that I had done this to myself again. I was so hard on myself. And I think if anyone's listening and can relate, that's the advice I would give you, is don't be so GD hard on yourself, because those people that are making you feel that way are already doing it to you. Don't do it to yourself. Don't do it to yourself. And I wish I could have told myself that in that moment. But be gentle with yourself, have compassion with yourself so that you can step back and take a real good hard look at what's actually happening. And that's what I did. And I remember one night in particular, I was flying out to Colorado. I had never visited before, and was visiting an old friend, a dear friend. And my flight was very early in the morning. So my girlfriend stayed over at my place so that she could take me to the airport in the morning. Well, my ex showed up at my apartment that night, pounding on the door, demanding to talk to me. So my girlfriend said, are you comfortable with this? And I said, yes, as long as I'm, not alone in a room with him. So we fought for a long time. I cried pretty much all night, didn't drink any water, ended up flying still, and flying up to Colorado elevation from sea level. And we all know how hard that is. And I got very sick. So changing gears a little bit, I'm also a type 1 diabetic. And because of those complications of having an autoimmune disease, I was hospitalized for 3 days of my very first vacation in Colorado. And it was just such a realization for me that he could kill me at, he could kill me and it wouldn't even be with his own hands because he's making me sick and I'm allowing it. And that was a good realization for me once I got out of the hospital and spent my last few days in Breckenridge in Colorado just enjoying the time off. I came back, shut it down, never talked to him again. And I attempted to move on and partied maybe a little bit longer than I needed to, and eventually moved to Colorado to lose the weight, keep it off, because Summit County at the time and may still be the best recreation spot in the country, I believe. So it has helped me stay healthy, helped me keep the weight off, and I found new friends and new hobbies and a whole new life.
That is amazing. I want to take a minute just to reflect on what you said, that he could kill me and it wouldn't even be with his own hands, because I think so many people don't realize that abuse can affect us and abuse can kill us, and it doesn't even have to be physical abuse. So I do want you, if you will, to talk about that for a moment. Was that as huge a realization for you as it was just when you said it for me, do you think?
I remember sitting in the hospital bed with greasy hair, greasy face. I'd been vomiting for days. It's a condition called ketoacidosis. Essentially, your blood sugar is so high that acid develops in your blood because your body can't process all the sugar that's just coursing through you. And that's what had happened. It takes, depending on how bad it is, it can take IV fluids, it can take days. And that's what happened to me. So I was sitting in the hospital bed thinking, how long has it been since I've had to deal with this? How long has it been since I've had ketoacidosis? Because I was diagnosed when I was 4. I've had this my whole life. But ketoacidosis isn't something that you should have happen on a regular basis. And so I remember thinking to myself, this shouldn't be happening. This was preventable. And I allowed it to happen. I did. And taking that ownership over your life can be so powerful, or it can be really daunting and it can overwhelm you. So again, information is power. If you're feeling like it's the latter and you're feeling like it's really overwhelming and daunting, I don't blame you at all. But that is where you can start, is shifting that narrative in your head. And this is why I do life coaching, because it's all about perspective and being able to shift that narrative in your head and say, I'm better than this. Life will not defeat me. And it's trying to, because the external world is so loud and it will always have its obstacles. But it's up to you to listen to your ego or your intuition. And your ego is the one telling you, this is too much. I'm not good enough. My ego almost took me down, going back to he could have killed me and it wouldn't have even been him. It would have been my choice. And not only was I sick on my first vacation in how long, but I was also suicidal at that time. And I know this is a lot of heavy, heady stuff that we're talking about, but let's be real here. This is the time, right? And it obviously was a failed suicide attempt, but I used my insulin. I used my insulin that gives me life, and I overdosed myself on purpose. And as I felt myself starting to slip into it's the opposite of ketoacidosis. It's when your number is so low, you go into a coma. And I felt myself starting to get there. So I called my roommate and I said, hey, I'm so sorry. I did this thing. I need you to come take me to the hospital. And she did. And the ER doctor asked me if I had the means to get counseling. And I said no, because I did not have benefits at the time. I was going to school. I was waiting tables. And this angel of a doctor gave me resources, free resources, but then also said, kind of with a wink almost, you should think about getting a dog. And I kid you not, 2 weeks later, my little brother called me and he said, hey, I'm living at mom's place still, and I'm hiding this dog. And I said, you're hiding a dog? So I meet this dog. She's everything. And I had her for 15 years through thick and thin. And I truly believe that she helped me get my life back in a certain way. But it was all leading up from that dark place of scarcity and fear and anxiety and guilt, even of saying, wow, I've done this to my life again. I went from my parents' house to now this situation, and something needs to change. And the change, I thought, my ego told me that change was to just end it, because that would be easier, right? But my intuition said, no, you control your life, you control your day. Don't let anyone ruin this for you. You've worked so hard for this already. And then, my 20s were just sort of stumbling through my growth and sort of like a rebirth. And I'm so glad I landed in Colorado because it's such a beautiful place. And I wouldn't have met you, obviously, but it's been a ride, to say the
Yes,
least.
and I agree. This is an amazing place. I feel like it's healing in and of itself. But let's just tell all the viewers we don't have room for all of you. So you can come visit us, but we don't have room for all of you.
Disclaimer.
Right. What I would like to hit on for a minute. So you kind of had the epiphany. You wanted to live, you wanted to be better for yourself, but you've already said that was a process in and of itself where you went through a lot of time of kind of self-medicating and doing the wrong things to take care of yourself to get to where you are today. So will you talk a little bit about, and you don't have to give specifics of what you did or how you did it if you don't want to, but will you talk a little bit about that process and where it led you to get to where you are today? Because I do think that's a big struggle for a lot of people, is they sit in that place of self-medication and numbing. So how did you get through that and then get past that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would love to say that it was just all self-realization and zen and all the sunshine and fairy tales, but it was some very real things happening in my life. So when I was 18 and I attempted suicide, I also was given the diagnosis of high blood pressure because of my weight and because of being type 1. So with being type 1 diabetic, your blood sugars fluctuate more than, no matter how well you manage it. I'm not saying don't manage it. Obviously, my diabetes is very well managed. However, the best that you can do, it's still unnatural because you're pretending to be a pancreas, and the human body is an amazing thing. So with that being said, these fluctuations in your body chemistry constantly can give you side effects like high blood pressure or kidney failure, even in severe cases. So I was 18, so I'd had diabetes for 14 years when I was diagnosed with high blood pressure. And the doctor said, yeah, you would have maybe been diagnosed with this from being a type 1 diabetic, but it would have been prolonged and it may not have happened if you hadn't been so heavy for so long. So for me, being an 18-year-old taking high blood pressure medication didn't make sense. That didn't make sense to me. I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't healthy. So after the suicide attempt and after all of that, the diagnosis and the drama, I started exercising, started eating healthfully, started losing a little bit of weight, but then really committed to it when I moved to Colorado and really committed to the lifestyle. And I sold my car even, and traded it for a bike. So it would force me to commute on my bicycle. That was a really rapid transition for me in terms of my happiness and my weight loss. But here's the thing is I was doing all of this physical, tangible work because I'm type A and it's something I can see and do and tangibly feel. But I just found new ways to hate my body. I lost the weight, but I found new ways to hate on myself. And it wasn't until that weight loss transition that I realized the internal work still had yet to be done. And that journey of physical healthfulness prepared me to have the strength to do the mental piece of the healthfulness. And I'm still working on it. But went to a lot of therapists, a lot of counselors, EMDR, breath work, trying to think of all the things that I've tried. I'd love to try acupuncture. I've heard that that can work wonders. I tried chiropractic work, but these were all things I tried for my mental health. Because I knew that I was struggling with it and I knew that it didn't have to be this way. I say that I knew it didn't have to be this way, but I didn't know that at the time. It just felt like it should feel better. It just felt like it shouldn't feel so tight and restricted and scary all the time. So it was up to me to sort of find that place. And it wasn't until, I made major shifts in my life. I moved to a different state, 1,200 miles away from my friends and family. I lost 75 pounds and kept it off and changed my lifestyle and changed my eating habits. But it didn't have the effect that I thought it would upstairs. And you can change your location, you can change your body, you can change all of these things. But until you understand that your mind is a sacred place and you need to keep it clean, all of those other things are just going to be extras. There's a guru that I like to follow on YouTube. I'm really into self-help videos and books and things like that. But I love those videos that are 10 minutes or less because we have the attention span of a beetle these days. And his name's Sadhguru. He's amazing. He does a lot of public speaking. And he talks a lot about the mind being a place where you should have peace as a baseline. It's not that peace is a given, it's happiness. So happiness, joy, excellence, success, even physical strength and endurance. It all has to come from a place of peace. And I just felt so turbulent for so long. And I think it was exhausting for me being the brooding artist to feel all of that feeling all of the time and not have a safe place to go to. It was like I was looking at all these external resources for safety, putting that burden on my friends, putting that burden on the town I was living in, putting that burden on my physical body and how my physical body was performing. But truthfully, it was all internal. And that was such a relief to know that the safe space was with me the whole time. It was just up to me to clean house and make it the safe space I knew it should be.
That is so important for people to hear, that we are in control of our own safe spaces. So I'm so glad that you said that. And it does, of course, remind me of my favorite movie, The Wizard of Oz, when Glinda tells Dorothy, "You've had the power all along." I think I've said that one other time on this show. So where are you at today? Let's talk a little bit about your continued work, because I think that's also important for people to hear, that it's not something that you flip a switch and everything's great and you just power on with life. So how is it going today, and what are your continued practices to keep your mind in a healthy space?
Yeah, thank you for asking. That's a good question. It's something I ask myself regularly, and that's part of the process, is just checking in. It's cute for me to sit here and say that, knowing how difficult it truly can be in practice, of sitting in stillness and checking in. It can even be scary to do that and to dive deeper and say, how am I actually feeling right now? Not how people are telling me I'm feeling, not how people are telling me how I'm acting, but how do I feel about how I'm feeling? One thing that genuinely helps me is meditation. I say that with hesitancy because that has its own stigma. But listen, I came from scarcity. I came from food stamps. I came from missing meals. I came from a place that I didn't want to stay. And I have a lot of practicality in my day to day. I know I need to go to bed at the same time so that I wake up at the same time. I don't use alarms because I think that creates anxiety. If you need alarms in your life, I totally understand. Try something gentle, like one of those natural sun alarms, or waking up with music instead of an alarm. I know it sounds small, but it's going back to what you were saying. It's not just a big boom aha moment. It's these little rituals that you integrate in your day, showing yourself that you care about yourself, showing yourself that you are going to take care of yourself, trusting yourself enough to know that you're going to have a good day because you decided to have a good day. Again, going back to life coaching, this is why I get so excited. You can tell in my voice how excited and how important this is for me to get across to people, because you do have all the power. You don't have to give it away. You don't have to fear it. With great power comes great responsibility. Yes, but that is where the magic happens. That is where your flow is. And so going back to meditation, I'm a type A person. I like to be organized. I like to know where everything is at all times. However, meditation is that unicorn concept. It really is everything that everybody tells you that it is. And it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It can be 3 minutes a day. 3 minutes a day. Just sitting and listening to your breath. It doesn't have to be anything else than that. If it helps you, count the breaths. If it helps you stay engaged, count the breaths. But just sitting with yourself for 3 minutes, whether it's while you're warming up your car, whether it's brushing your teeth, don't turn on that podcast. Don't turn on the radio. Just sit with stillness and let those thoughts come, but make sure you let them go. That's the key there. So I do try to meditate every day. I'm not perfect at it, but I know that if my energy is going down a little bit, meditation will bring it back every time. Every time. It's helped me be less reactive too. So I used to seem to have a lot of triggers. And now that I've been meditating, it seems that those triggers are not so much triggers anymore, and that I'm less reactive overall. I've also noticed weird things. Like I used to, when I would get anxious, I used to have a mannerism of pulling out my own eyelashes. They say that's pretty common with people that have experienced trauma. I've stopped doing that. I've stopped chewing on my cuticles. I've stopped biting my nails. So it's these little things that I've found. I'm sleeping so much better. My workouts are better because I'm more present for them. And just in general, my focus is better because of meditation. Meditation is like, your mind is kind of like a puppy, and meditation helps you train the puppy and housebreak the puppy so that the puppy's not peeing all over everything. And that is really invaluable, and it's free and it's simple. If you want to use an app, I started with Headspace. I also really love the app Calm. This is not a sponsorship, I promise, or anything like that, but they're both free to a certain point, and they will teach you how to meditate and help you with guided meditations and keep you engaged. But that is just one of many things that I've integrated in my day to day, but it's the little things. It's the little things, or even just little Post-it notes that you have around the house. It doesn't even need to say anything on it. It could just be a reminder for you to check in. You see a Post-it note, you check in with yourself.
I love what you just said about meditation. So first off, I also pull out my eyelashes, so I did not know why. I guess now I do. Great. But what I love that you said about meditation is how easy it can be, because I do think so many people believe it has to be this grandiose effort and experience where I have to sit cross-legged in a dark room with no sound and X, Y, Z, and I have to sit there silently for 4 hours. So I really appreciate how you said, hey, you can do it while you're brushing your teeth. You can do it while your car's warming up. For those of you in other climates, cars warming up is a thing here. We have to do that in Colorado in the wintertime. So I love how you pointed out that it doesn't have to be some huge thing. It can be as simple as, hey, while you're brushing your teeth, just sit with yourself. What would you say to the people who aren't ready to let those thoughts yet come in and go out? You know, the people who are still in that space
Mhm.
of trauma and guilt and fear and all those things, and they're like, man, I can't even sit with my thoughts for a couple minutes. What
Yeah.
should they do?
I see you. I feel you. I relate. And I'm so sorry you're feeling those things. Are those thoughts serving you, or are you serving those thoughts? That was the realization for me, was I was a slave to those negative thoughts and those experiences that I had as a young child, where abandonment is strong with this one. I have abandonment issues and attachment issues that we could talk about all day. But are those thoughts really serving me? Are they? They're just making me feel bad. And I can't change the
Mm-hmm.
event, but I can change my emotion around the event. That's where the power happens. You can't control the external. You can only control the internal, but that's good news. That's great news for
Mm-hmm.
everybody. It's just different than what we've been taught.
Absolutely. It is relearning or newly learning that we can control those
Mm-hmm.
things. I love the energy and the passion and enthusiasm that you have when you talk about these things. It's so clear, it's on your face, it's in your voice. You just light up. What brought you to that place? Because I know a little bit about the transformation in the story of you getting a life coach and the life coach telling you you should be a life coach. What does that feel like to you now to be able to take the things that you've learned, the things that you've been through, and give those gifts to other people?
Well, thank you for saying that. I do think that it's a gift. And honestly, just being able to say that about myself feels uncomfortable almost, because I didn't think I had gifts. I was told that I was worthless, and I was told that I was not valuable. And being able to understand that that was just a human opinion, whether it was the opinion of my parent or otherwise, that's all it was. And my opinion of myself is more important. So it was a lot of learning and a lot of knowledge and a lot of self-help books, and just undoing decades of of confusion. Of confusion is what it is. And so with my life coach, he talks about, he's a local as well, Mike Meseroff. Hey, Mike. He's amazing, but he's a personal freedom coach specifically, or he'll also call himself a happiness coach. And I was really struggling with the feelings of, why is life so hard? Everything's so hard. Why is everything so hard? I'm working so hard and getting nothing for it. And he talks a lot about the path of least resistance. A lot of successful people will talk about the path of least resistance, and finding your zone or finding your flow is the path of least resistance. So working a job that you don't like, that's not the path of least resistance. That is so hard. And the longer you hold on to that job, the longer you're holding on to those bad vibes, but you're also keeping somebody else from having that job that they might value and appreciate,
Mm-hmm.
and that you're sort of resentful of. And the path of least resistance for me is helping people, and being the middle child and having so many siblings. I adore all of them, but it's only natural that in a group that large, you're going to have disagreements. And I'm usually the one that can patch things up, or at least I'm communicating with everybody at the same time consistently. There's no, grudges or hard feelings. It's not to say that that hasn't happened in the past. I myself am pretty fiery and sassy, so I have my fair share of disagreements. But I just realized I was coaching them as a child, as a young adult now, you know, with every job that I've had, being a trainer or being in a leadership position, managing a team of, a large team, I realized I was just coaching people. I was coaching people constantly and building them up and giving them tools and resources. And it was always about the mental game. It was always about how they're feeling about themselves. And I realized early on as a leader in formal 9-to-5s that if I led with assertiveness and aggression, it worked a lot of the time. But if I led with compassion, it worked every single time, every time. And then when I started life coaching and was told that maybe I have a propensity for this, that's when I looked into certifications. That's when I started doing beta testing with some people and offering my services for free. That's, again, another reason I met you and am now doing poetry workshops. But it was all leading up to the path of least resistance. It's something that I've already been doing in my life. I enjoy coaching people. And going back to what you were saying, I get so worked up and so passionate that it's hard to ignore the sense, because for me, coming from such a dark place and getting myself out of that and getting to the place I am now, I know what it's like. I know what it's like, and you don't have to stay there. I promise you, you do not have to stay there longer than you want to. And I just want to help people understand that because I know how hard it was for me to go it alone. And that's my path of least resistance.
And I do think that is one of the hardest things for people to realize is you don't have to be in that space. You don't have to remain in that place. I know a lot of people have financial issues. They have kids, pets. There's a lot of things that can hold us back. What do you say to those people?
Everything is a challenge depending how you look at it. Going back to tough love, you could see any given situation as negative or positive. That choice is up to you. If you, using traffic as an example, I don't like traffic either. However, you have two choices. You can have a fit and fume at your steering wheel and maybe even honk your horn, maybe follow a little bit too closely, maybe potentially get into an accident because your emotions were running the show. Or you could turn on the radio, take a look around, maybe not turn on the radio and sit in stillness for a little bit. This happened to me the other day. I was maybe leaving my house a little bit later than I wanted to, and I was at a light, and instead of getting frustrated, I looked around, and the car in front of me had a sticker on it that said, "I hope you have a great day today." And I never would have seen that if I were staring at the traffic light upset. But because I took a minute to look around, I was able to see all of the beauty that was around me, even though it was as small as a bumper sticker. So the point that I'm getting at is gratitude. That was a long way of me saying gratitude is where it's at. Because if you have all of these factors in your life that you're using as limiters, they're always going to be limiters. They're always going to look that way because that's how you're looking at them. But if you decide that the path of least resistance is, I'm going to find a coach that's doing beta testing, like I was just doing recently, doing it for free. I'm going to make sure that there's somebody that offers this beta testing remote so that I can be at home with my children or my pets. This is honestly why I have found my niche as a coach to be creativity. Mm-hmm. Because, yeah, I wrote a book last year. That's great. That's amazing. I wrote a book. That's awesome. But that's not necessarily why creation is my niche. It's because every single moment of our day, we're creating. Whether you like it or not, you are creating. What if you created with intention? What if you thought about what you were creating? You're going to go make yourself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for your lunch, and you don't have to think about that. It's just jelly. It's just peanut butter. You've done it before, maybe a million times. But what if you were present for making something as simple as a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? instead of creating a mindless peanut butter and jelly sandwich, maybe you think, ooh, I have coconut flakes. Ooh, I have chocolate chips. Ooh, I have bananas. This is going to be the best peanut butter and jelly sandwich I've ever had. And that's a small example, but it's a technique that works on a larger scale. The more that you're present and active and intentional with your creation, the more you're going to be able to create. You just have to offer yourself that space.
I love that. Now I want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich first off, but a really super amazing one, like with honey and white chocolate chips. I don't know. I'm getting crazy over here. Yes. So tell me, do you feel like it's still a continued process of work? It sounds like you have done the work. You have broken that cycle of violence, which is amazing for you. And that's going to be amazing for the people that you impact going forward, because you're not going to carry that cycle forward. But do you feel like it is still a day-to-day effort to not get back to that place with another relationship?
Mm-hmm. Good question. I think that it's only natural that people would gravitate towards those relationships, going back to the comfort zone. It's what you've known. It's what you've known in the past. So it's what you're comfortable with. But greatness comes outside of your comfort zone. You've heard that probably many times. We've probably all heard that. And I think that getting myself out of that situation allowed me to get to the top of the mountain and look at the situation instead of being stuck in it. And I like to say that I would never go back to that place. And I think my new rituals and my new habits and my new personal narrative keep me afloat and help me stay in that place. And it's not without trying, but it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't. It feels like a practiced effort that I deserved to give to myself. And if we're willing to do hard things for other people, we should be willing to do hard things for ourselves. And at first, it's going to be maybe a little messy, maybe a little imperfect, probably a little imperfect, especially meditation. Meditation starting out will be imperfect. It'll be messy. It might not even be fun at first, but just let yourself relax and enjoy it. And those are the little things I look forward to now, is the continued personal growth and journaling and practicing gratitude, because those things feel good. Dwelling on the past experiences or thinking about how I could have, should have, would have changed it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good, and it doesn't do anything. It truly doesn't do anything except for make you feel bad. So going back to, is that thought serving you? Is it serving you? Because you are the one thinking it. There's nobody telling you. Maybe sometimes there's people telling you these ideas, but you are the one that gets to control it. In fact, biologically, the brain only, excuse me, my alarm's going on. Your brain only holds emotion for 6 seconds. The rest is up to you. And think about how long sometimes I've lost a whole weekend on a thought because I just kept thinking about it. And Esther Hicks is another amazing public speaker, and she talks about thinking about thinking about thinking. And we all do it. But what if we could break the cycle?
Yes, I know I do that myself. Sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night with that thought and you just can't let it go. Do you now have a relationship with your mom?
I do not. There's a lot to unpack there, but when I was younger, I maintained a relationship with her for a long time. I was worried about her. I called her a lot, and it just reached a level that it was too toxic to continue. And there were ways that she was affecting my life in a serious way, like even my credit score, even brass tacks, things like that were happening. And so we had a very long phone call. I remember I had just gone home to see everybody, and I was around Steamboat, almost home. And she called, and it was not the most positive conversation we've ever had. There's a lot of crying. And she eventually told me that she didn't support my lifestyle and that she felt like I had been dragged to Colorado, and that, all of these things that she was just saying out of her own pain, right? She was just communicating her pain to me in a way that wasn't clear. And it hurt me a lot in the process. And so I ended that phone call and let the sleeping dog lie for a while. And then actually wrote her a letter, never sent it. And it's been a little irreparable since. And for me, it's a safer place to be. And this is what I told her in our last phone call, is that I don't know if you're a safe person to have in my life anymore. And that to be able to move forward, I need to take a break from this relationship. And I feel so guilty, right? Because I'm her child. She's my mother. That will never change. But if I want my life to change, if I want my life to change, then I needed to set boundaries around that relationship. And when she's ready to talk to me in the way that I've asked of her, with respect and mutual understanding, then I'm all for it. But until then, I think it's important for people to realize that I do have some shame and some guilt around that scenario. Obviously, I'm a human person. However, for me to live a full and healthy life, anyone should feel comfortable with any relationship. It doesn't matter how deep or how long or where that relationship started. You should not need or feel the need to keep those people in your life. And if they're gaslighting you, it might not be intentional, but it's up to you to recognize and to set boundaries for yourself around your security and your safety and your mental health.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I think that's so important for people to hear over and over and over. And it's been said by other guests in previous episodes, but I'm so glad that you reiterated that even if it's a family member, even if you are the child or even if you are the parent, that if something isn't healthy for you, that's okay. And it's okay to step away from that in what's best for you. So I know you said if your mom is ever able to communicate with you with respect to the boundaries that you've set, great. What if that doesn't happen?
That's the guilt, right? That's the guilt, is what if she passes away and we never talk again? What if I pass away and we never talk again? What if, we're 2 states away right now. We can't even physically get together or anything like that. And not only that, but it's hurting my brothers and sisters too, because they know that she's not healthy. Not to speak for them, but I don't know how active their relationships are with her either. And we're just all trying to make sure that, she's taken care of, but that she's not taking away from the lives that we're trying to build for ourselves. Most of my siblings have children and partners and careers and otherwise. And I think the important thing to understand is that you're no less human for demanding respect. You're no less human for deserving safety. And I think one of the harsher things that I will say is you don't owe them anything. You don't owe them anything. I understand they're your parent. They raised you. They gave birth to you. You also didn't have much control over that. You were born as their child. They had the control. Or you're in a committed relationship and that person becomes violent or becomes mentally abusive. You don't owe them anything. You owe yourself everything.
I just wanted to be silent for a second and let people take that in. You owe yourself everything. So, Brittany, let's talk about a little bit of relationship advice, and that can be family relationships, romantic relationships, all of the above, because in our conversation, there have been so many parallels with those different types of relationships. What would be a piece of advice that you would give out to all of our viewers and listeners? Just your biggest, best relationship advice that you want to make sure people remember?
Good question. I love the loaded questions. Relationship
That's my
advice.
job.
Yes, absolutely. I would say with relationships, one thing I keep coming back to is communication. Communication, it's not cliche at all. It is so painfully true. If you are unable to communicate effectively, your point will get lost. And if you are unable to communicate effectively, the cycle will continue. So whether that's communicating with your partner, your family, or yourself, being able to communicate effectively will save you every time. Like when I was able to communicate effectively with my mom for the very first time. For the very first time, I was able to think calmly and clearly without emotion. And I communicated with her that, look, if you want to continue talking to me regularly, you got to cut out the name calling. You can't take low blows. You can't dig into my lifestyle. And when I was able to communicate with her effectively, it was not necessarily the outcome I wanted or expected, but I don't have that toxic energy in my life anymore because I was able to communicate effectively as to what my needs were. And I've worked a lot and continue to work on my communication with myself and being honest with myself and listening to my intuition. My ego is the one that will crop up and make to-do lists and pros and cons lists. And my intuition will say, just go for a drive. You don't need to think about the pros and cons. You don't need to think about the things that you're not doing. You need to follow your intuition because something is here. Something worthwhile is here. And invariably, something good will always happen when I follow the good feelings. It's funny how that works. You don't get happiness by chasing it. You get happiness by being happy where you're at. And then you learn what happiness is and you keep following happiness. So I digress. The important thing here to remember is with communication with yourself and others, being able to communicate effectively requires communication with little emotion. Yeah, you're feeling an emotion, but being able to step back and look at that emotion. There's a book called Mind Hacking that I actually really like. And they talk about the 5 whys of, I'm feeling really angry today. Why am I feeling really angry today? Well, I'm feeling really angry because I didn't get any sleep last night. Well, why didn't you get any sleep last night? Well, because I went to bed thinking about XYZ and I was angry when I went to bed. Why were you thinking about that right before bedtime when you knew it was going to make you angry? Oh, well, interesting. So that helps me a lot when I'm communicating with myself rather than what I used to do in communicating with myself, which was, you're mad again? Let's get more mad. Let's figure out some reason and justification as to why you're mad so that you can get more mad because mad is your comfort zone. So rather than feeling hurt or depressed or even accountable for your actions or your life, you're just going to get mad. That was my default for a long time. And now I like to look at my communication with myself with curiosity and say, why are you being this way with yourself? And looking at emotions from sort of like a third-party perspective helps you communicate effectively with yourself, and then in turn helps you communicate effectively with others.
That was some good advice. Just all back to communication. What I love, though, that you said was communication with others, but also communication with yourself. I know that we are rolling up on time. We've been talking for a long time here today, but it's been amazing.
That's lovely.
Yeah, and there are a couple last things I do want to hit. So you've mentioned a couple authors that you really enjoy, But you, my dear, are an author now, a published author. And what was so cool is the first time that Brittany and I met, we sat down at a table, and unbeknownst to her book was sitting right there in the coffee shop that we were at. So I would love for you to talk for a couple minutes about what inspired you to write this book of poetry that spans through the 4 seasons of a year, and how it felt in writing the book.
Sure, sure. It's crazy to call myself an author. It's really exciting. And my book is called Weather Vanes. It's poems for every season. Like you said, it's 4 chapters. It's fall, winter, spring, and summer. And fall is the literal fall of sort of like falling from grace, if you will, was the concept of realizing what I had been through, and that it wasn't my fault. Winter is sort of cold and raw and emotional. And then spring is all about growth and the realization that I have the control. And summer is the power. Summer is the control. Summer is everything. So the book is quite a progression. Fall and winter are pretty heavy. Spring and summer will give you goosebumps and motivate you. And my motivation for writing the book, I hate to say, was quarantine. So being a type 1 diabetic and having a heart condition, I was double trouble and high risk, and just holed up in my apartment, hiking still, getting outside still when the weather was appropriate. But writing has always been an outlet for me to be able to emote. And I have a lot of bad poems, but I realized quickly that I have a story to share, and my art gives me the gift of the communication piece of communicating my emotions with others. And there are a lot of poems in the book that sound romantic in terms of the references, but they're actually about my parents. So the whole book in and of itself is all about relationships of all different kinds. Yeah, there are some romantic references in there, but a lot of it is my relationship with myself and my relationship with my parents.
Was it very healing to write all that down, or was it a struggle to rehash and remember and go back through those experiences and emotions, or both?
Yeah. So I think in the beginning, it was very healing. I would write sort of furiously, sort of angrily, and then go back and curate those poems into something reasonable and feasible and readable. And now that I'm doing spoken word performances, there are moments where I will read. There's a couple specific poems about my dad, because we have a broken relationship as well. And he struggles with addiction. And I totally understand that, because the apple doesn't fall far. And when I read a specific poem out loud, I do find myself being quite emotional at times. And it can be difficult at times to come to terms with the way things shook out, so to speak. But my point in writing this was that I know that I'm not alone. And yeah, writing it was cathartic, but being able to share it is even better. And being able to see the look on people's faces when they hear or read my poetry is pretty profound. And I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. So really, it's just selfish.
And that's okay. It's okay to be selfish sometimes when it takes care of us. Self-care is not selfish. So we'll say that.
Agreed.
We have talked about some really heavy topics today, and I'm so glad that you have been willing to open up and really share with people what you've been through and how you have made it through and survived. But now we're going to lighten it up as we close out here. And you know that I love tattoos. I have lots of tattoos. You also have tattoos. So I would love to hear about your favorite tattoo that you have.
Ooh, that's a tough one. They're all so different. I will say my style is American traditional, thick black lines, usually no shading, just very traditional. So I have, going back to music, I have a music note on my ribs, and I asked the artist or the tattooer. I just watched your last episode. They're tattooers now. They don't call them painting artists, right? So the tattooer took my concept. I told him I wanted a treble clef, if you're familiar with music or reading music, but I wanted it to look like a constellation, and he did an amazing job. But I also have my very first tattoo, which is just so endearing to me and will stay with me that whole experience forever, is on my shoulder back here. It's a little star with this, in between two of the star legs is a triangle. So it sort of sits in two of the legs of the star nicely. So it's a star with a little triangle, because I have 5 sisters and 3 brothers, and the star has 5 points and the triangle has 3 points.
I love that. That's super cool.
Yeah.
So I also have a treble clef. So we will have to we'll have to compare those and contrast, because I definitely want to see yours. What's going to be your next tattoo? What tattoos do we have coming up?
Well, with the pandemic, I have a long list going, but I hope this isn't too heavy to end on. I talked about my dog earlier. She lived to be a healthy, happy 15 years old, but I just lost her last year.
I'm so sorry.
So I really want to get her paw prints. That's first priority.
I love that. I have 2 little dogs, and they are my children. People say whatever you want. My dogs are my kids.
You're in good company.
That's just how I feel. So I love that, and I can't wait to see it. So Brittany, if people aren't already following you, please share where people can get your book and where they can find you, both on social media and if they're interested in your coaching services.
Absolutely. So my Instagram handle is Brittany Josie Poetry, and it's spelled the classic BrittanyJosie.com is my website. So my Instagram handle is Brittany Josie Poetry. My website is BrittanyJosie.com. If you go to BrittanyJosie.com, you can order my book and you will get a signed copy. Right now I have a limited supply of special bookmarks that I'll throw in as well. And then my coaching services are right on there as well. So as soon as you log in, you'll be able to see the shop tab or the consulting tab, whatever you're looking for. And then my books are sold locally as well. So if you're wanting to support a local business and you live in Summit County, they're available at Next Page Bookstore and Ohana in Breckenridge, as well as the Frisco Art Collective.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Brittany, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you, again, being willing to open up, share the struggles that you went through and the successes that you have found in taking care of yourself. So thank you for being here today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. It's been my honor, and thank you for having me.
I really hope you guys enjoyed that conversation with Brittany as much as I did. I think we all need to remember her points about communication and boundaries. Remind yourself those things every single day. So remember, until next week, you are strong enough and you are worth it.